While crime levels in South Africa remain one of the key challenges facing the country, Police Minister Nathi Mthethwa today announced the national crime statistics indicating that there have been increases in murder, attempted murder, aggravated robbery and hijacking over the past year. Joining us in studio for a look at these numbers is Chandre Gould, Senior Research Fellow in Governance Crime and Justice Division of the Institute for Security Studies. Chandre, thanks so much for joining us. As we look at these crime statistics, there is a significant decline, down by at least 4.2%. But my question is, are a lot of crimes in South Africa being reported?
I think there is still a significant underreporting, particularly in certain categories of crime. So you will have certain crimes that are reported. For example, you might have home burglaries reported if the owners of the homes are insured, they'd have an incentive to report. But I think we've seen for a number of years that crimes like rape, for example, remain underreported. And it's often very difficult to assess to which extent they're underreported, but I think that we can certainly think about crimes like domestic violence, crimes like rape being in that category of underreported.
What do you make of the assessment by South Africa's Banking Risk Information Centre today? The CEO there, CEO Pillay, saying that the downward trend is really a signal that the police force in South Africa is starting to move in the right direction when it comes to collaboration with banks, when it comes to collaboration with cash and transit companies and SABRIC. Do you think that's a solid assessment there, and can we celebrate these numbers to some degree?
I think we certainly should be celebrating the decrease, a significant decrease in bank robberies. We should also be celebrating the decrease in stock theft, for example, which might result from the Rural Safety Plan. And I think we can be pleased by the decrease in cash and transit robberies. I think what should concern us, however, is the increase in the number of business robberies. That's robberies in shopping malls and at other small businesses as well. And I think we need to be concerned about the fact that violence remains very high.
Just on that, Chandre, the Minister Nathi Mthethwa mentioned that unity, or rather the strength in these numbers was characterized by unity against crime. Samantha mentioned that there has been some unity between the South African Police Force as well as SABRIC, but which other organizations might have come onto the bandwagon to help the SAPS in fighting crime?
Look, I think one of the downfalls of having the police minister announce the crime statistics every year is that the focus then is very solidly on the police. But there are a number of crimes that we're most afraid of, crimes like murder, house robberies, business robberies. These sort of crimes, the police only have a limited capacity to deal with and respond to, because these crimes are driven by social factors. So what we do need to see is long-term crime prevention strategies being put in place. And I think the absence of detailed crime prevention strategies that bring together non-governmental organizations, government departments other than the police, to really target areas where violence is high and to undo the normalization of violence is going to take a long time.
What is it? So tell us about the process that needs to be embarked upon to be able to have a different type of approach to dealing with crime in the high crime areas right now, and looking at collaboration. I mean, how does that mindset change? What type of leadership initiatives need to be installed there?
Well, first of all, I think we need to change our rhetoric. So our rhetoric has been around war on crime for a number of years. And when one's in war mentality, you respond to violence with violence. And that really just entrenches a cycle of violence. So I think if we're concerned about dealing with violence, we need to look at, for example, what is causing violence in our homes, violence in our streets, violence in our schools. Why is it that more than 70% of children in our schools are still being subjected to corporal punishment? Things that start and then give children the idea that you solve your problems and that it's okay to solve your problems through violence. So until we address those kind of issues, I think we're going to be trapped in this cycle.
Are there any particular proposed plans in which South Africa can implement to combat crime then, instead of the violent methods?
Certainly there are a number of initiatives that have been shown to work elsewhere and indeed in South Africa. So for example, we've seen that counselling and in-depth counselling with the families of young offenders and young offenders themselves, particular kinds of cognitive behavioural therapy, have been effective. We've also seen in some countries that programs to support parents and assist them to parent more effectively, not to neglect their children, how to respond to their children in an unauthoritarian manner. These are some of the things that can undo patterns of violence. We do have evidence from South Africa about what works, but we need to start finding ways to implement that in communities highly affected by violence.
Let's look at residential properties right now and the increase in robberies, because that's up almost 70% in the year. I mean, that's a sharp increase there. That certainly is not a figure to be celebrating. So comment on that specifically right now, where that's taking place, the increases, and also the fact that you're seeing suburban areas right now turning to increased attention on identification of those people entering, for example, complexes. You've got your ID, you've got copies of the ID, and it's becoming quite technical, all the security systems that are being implemented.
You see, one of the problems that you have when you go for a target hardening approach, which is that would be, so you'd put up higher fences, electrify your fences, and then when that doesn't work, you do something else, is that robbers need to then increasingly find more sophisticated and more violent ways to overcome those measures. I think what's also concerning is robberies in streets and in homes, in semi-formal areas and in township areas. So I don't think it's only middle-class suburbs that are subject to this kind of violent crime, even though the focus is there. And I think that in those middle-class areas, perhaps one has a better resources to deal with it. So, for example, middle-class South Africans will be able to afford private security, whereas that kind of security isn't accessible to other South Africans, everybody else. And I think that's the problem. I think we need to be looking at holistic solutions.
Just before we close, Chandra, obviously this creates a negative sentiment in particular for the South African environment, and foreigners who want to invest in this country obviously don't look at it favorably.
Unfortunately, I think that is the case, but I think that what would signal some kind of confidence is if we see coming from senior policymakers at all levels the understanding that we need to concertedly address violence, crime and violence, which is probably our most important priority right now.
Chandra